Hey guys, welcome back to the Yes Initiative. So today we're going to be making mozzarella and carozza. It's just in a fancy Italian way of saying a fried grilled cheese. So we are going to be using fresh mozzarella cheese. We're going to be using an Italian loaf of bread. We're going to be using some skewers. We're going to be using flour. We're going to be using egg wash, and we are going to be using breadcrumbs. So, without any more talking, let's get into it, and I'll point out the finer details along the way. This is going to be the bread that we're using. This is an Italian loaf of bread that I just bought from the store. You don't have to use this, but you do want something that's a little bit firmer. You don't want like Wonder Bread. It's not going to work super great for what we're trying to do. Next thing we've got is fresh mozzarella cheese. The brand doesn't matter, but what I did was I bought pre-sliced one because sometimes if you don't have a really sharp knife, this can be hard to cut. You're going to need some skewers. They don't have to be exactly like this. They don't have to be this long. But you will need something to help hold all this together. So I'm going to be using a combination of seasoned Italian breadcrumbs and panko breadcrumbs. You don't have to use both. You could use one or the other. It's really all about personal preference. We are also going to need a little bit of egg wash and a little bit of flour. To start things off, we're going to want to cut our bread. You can use any kind of knife you like, but if your knife is not very sharp, you may want to use specifically a bread knife so that you don't smush the bread. Okay, so your slices don't have to be perfect, but you do want to get them kind of reasonably the same thickness. And we can begin. So the first step of this is assembling our sandwiches. Now be careful when you open fresh mozzarella. There's almost always some liquid in there and it's going to spill all over the place, so you might want to open this over the sink. Okay, so we're going to start with our first layer, and we're just going to put on our mozzarella. And then we go with our next layer. Now for me, this is looking about right in terms of the overall size that we want. So the next thing we need to do is we need to trim this. So we're going to take our sharp knife and we're just trying to trim off the crust. Now if you don't get it all, that's okay. I can't really get that out. There's a little bit of edges, not a big deal. All of this ends up being scrap. Now let's go ahead and build our second one. This one will be a little bit smaller because, as you can see, so as the bread gets smaller, you want to plan and start with your smallest piece of bread. That way, as you go, you won't be wasting a lot of stuff putting extra cheese on. And just like last time, there's some imperfections. Not a big deal. At this point, we want to clean up a little bit, get rid of all this extra stuff. Okay, now we need our skewers. Now this is an important step because this is going to determine how big our mozzarella sticks are. So I think on this slightly smaller one, we're going to go with 2. And on this slightly bigger one, I think we can get away with 3. Okay, now that we've got our skewers in, we can cut. Again, if your knife is not really sharp, you're going to want to use a serrated knife so you don't ruin your sandwich. Okay, so this is what we've got now. We've got bread and we've got cheese. And just lightly dust this with flour. This is more so that the mozzarella will have eggs stick to it, not so much for the bread. For this next step, you're going to need not that much egg, but you will need enough so that you can get it coated over everything, which is tricky because of the shape. So I'm going to add a couple more eggs to my mix here, just so that I have enough to make this work. And you just need to give the eggs a little mix up. So you're going to want to turn your bowl so that you can get all parts of this coated, and you may have to get a little hands-on and make sure that the bread gets egg everywhere, because anything that doesn't have egg on it is not going to have breadcrumb on it later. And once you've got the egg on there, we're going to place it into our next thing. Now I recommend trying to get as many into your bowl as possible at one time so that you don't get egg all over your hands. And once you've got it on there, you're going to get the excess off. So at this point, we're ready to start cooking. Now, I just turned on my deep fryer, And when I say I turned on my deep fryer, what I mean is I put a large pot on the stove, I put a bunch of oil in it, and I made sure I had a candy thermometer or a frying thermometer. That's a thermometer that goes to at least 400 degrees. We want to be frying this at 350 degrees. So all I've done is I've put my pot on the stove, I've turned the heat on to high, and I'm going to wait for it to heat up. In the meantime, we don't want to leave this out at room temperature because the cheese will actually get very melty and it will almost get too melty for when we cook it. So I'm going to put it right back on this little plate that we used and stick them in the fridge until our oil comes up to temp. At this point, our oil is up to 300 degrees and it is rising quickly. We're just about ready to start. Something that's important is to make sure that you have something to cool this off on when you're done. You're going to want a plate with some paper towels on it or a rack, something that will allow the oil to drip off. As we put them in, we do need to be careful. Make sure you don't burn yourself. And just go ahead and put it on in. Now if you notice, these haven't gone down all the way. So you need to get something like a pair of tongs to flip it around. And as you can see, this happens quite quickly as we're already golden brown. So now we've got our mozzarella sticks cooked and out of the fryer. And as you can see on this one, you can see the cheese inside is like molten. Now these skewers are going to be hot. You can take the skewers out if you want, but you will get some drippage from the cheese that's inside.
If you like these videos, turn on notifications and press subscribe.